Hello, I am Debbie Sr. I am here today to introduce to you Mrs. Winifred Walsh, my friend Winnie. We are here at her lovely home in Savannah, Georgia. Winnie has been a dear friend of mine for many years, and I would like to tell you a little bit more about her. Winnie has written 5 books, and I am here today so we can find out all about her latest book and a little bit about herself. Enjoy!
Hello, my name is Winnie Walsh. I'm a writer and I have been writing for over 40 years. I've published 5 books: Child of the Lots, Savannah Joy, Tim Defines and Defies Down Syndrome, From the South Bronx to Savannah, and this is my 5th book, Senator for a Day. This book tells the story of the United States Senator Rebecca Latimer Felton. Political slogans, unlike nursery rhymes, resonated more with young Rebecca Felton. Born in 1835, before the Civil War, and raised on a Georgian plantation, she listened to her father read the newspapers aloud. Slogans during the 1840 and the 1844 presidential elections, like "Tip a canoe and tie the two," and 54, 40, or fight, catapulted the candidates to that elected office. The power of words impressed Mrs. Felton at an early age, and during her entire life, she used the free press to that end. She wrote letters to the editor year after year. Her editorial skills enabled her husband, William, to garner a congressional seat after the Civil War. Life in Washington, D.C. introduced her to the political arena, and when her husband left Congress, she became more politically involved in Georgia. Her recognition never went unnoticed. In 1922, the sitting Governor Hardwick appointed Rebecca Felton to fill a United States Senate seat vacated by Thomas Watson, who died in office after 2 years. The symbolic appointment by the governor was a ploy to gain favor for the woman's vote. Georgia didn't ratify the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. The governor had his eye on the Senate seat. However, his plan backfired, and he lost in a primary election to Superior Court Judge Walter Judge. Rebecca was allowed to present her credentials to the U.S. Senate and was sworn in and served for a day in November of 1922. This is chapter 1 of Senator for a Day, and it's about Nellie, and the time frame is 1830. Massa Sloan, come quick. Little Nellie drop her baby right there in the field. She just fall to the ground and birth her baby. Come quick. She dying. Slave women streamed from the field toward the main house. Charles had a time trying to stop the carriage because his horse bolted when he heard the screams. Mr. and Mrs. Sloan heard the cries and made their way into the field. Eleanor and Charles exchanged a puzzled look, alighted from the carriage, and then followed the crying women. Eleanor and Charles Latimer, invited guests of the Sloans to an afternoon barbecue, lived on a nearby plantation. They never expected a reception of field hands exiting cotton fields, screaming and shouting about a birth. By the time the group reached the field, someone had cut the umbilical cord and wrapped the infant in a coarse, emptied cotton sling. A very young, ebony-colored mother, about 14, lay face up in freshly picked cotton, soaking up her spilled blood. Eleanor, 3 months pregnant, gasped. Mrs. Sloan studied the mulatto infant and turned to her husband with an icy glare. Some of the female hands did the same. "I don't know what to do," said Mrs. Sloan impassively. "Regardless of how valuable this child might be, the poor thing will probably die and be buried with her mother." Mrs. Sloan's words were as cold as the accusing stare she gave her husband. "We have a girl, Clarissa, whose baby died 2 days ago," offered Eleanor. "She will nurse the infant until she can be weaned, and then we will return her to you," she said, not believing the callousness of Mrs. Sloan's words. "That's fine with me, but don't return her This baby looks slow-witted already, and she's yours to keep." Mr. Sloane roared, turning to the field hands, and shouted again, "And take this body to the slave quarter for burial." Weeping field hands slowly, mechanically left the wretched scene, carrying the deceased mother. Mrs. Sloane ordered one of the slaves to take the infant to the main house, wash it, and wrap it up in any clean material they could find. While waiting for the infant, Eleanor walked away from the main house to where Charles stood beside their carriage. "I'm taking the baby back home, Charles. It has to be nursed soon or it will die. You stay. I know how important it is for you to see if some of the invited militia want the horses." "Of course, dear. I'll ask Sloane for the lend of a driver." Mrs. Sloane then appeared with the infant wrapped in a coarse wooden blanket. Eleanor took the baby and held it close to her. Charles came back, accompanied by the driver, kissed his wife, and helped her and the infant into the carriage. She held the crying infant close, thinking of her cruel birth. The screams of the women yelling, "Little Nellie," echoed loudly in her brain. "Shh, little one," Eleanor cooed. "You shall have your mother's name along with your rescuers. We will call you Nellie. Nellie Latimer." As the carriage left the Sloane plantation, the slaves near the gravesite, singing "Lord have mercy" and "Go down Moses" over and over again, filled the afternoon. She couldn't stop the flow of tears upon hearing the voices of lamenting slaves. "I'm not a bit surprised something like this happened on lecherous Sloane's plantation," Eleanor thought. How many times she recoiled from the grasp of Sloane's hand when he returned receipts for items bought in his store. His hand held on too long to suit Eleanor. She never mentioned it to Charles. Instead, now, the house servants do all the shopping at his general store. Mammy and Henry, two house servants, came with the inherited plantation. Charles and Eleanor were married only a short while when his father passed away. Along with the main house and a cotton fields, a tavern used as a stagecoach stop between Augusta and Macon, a stock of thoroughbred horses, and some 50 slaves now all belonged to Charles. As the carriage approached the Latimer plantation, Eleanor could hear the joyful singing of the field hands in the cotton fields, an antithesis of the screams and wailing left behind a short while ago. Mammy heard the noise of the trotting horses and came running down the portico stairs. "Miss Eleanor, what you all be doing home so early? We not expecting you. Oh, and where Miss Master Charles? And what you all holding?" Mammy rattled the questions off. "It's a long, hurtful story. But for now, here, take this infant. I want to find Clarissa. Is she out in the fields? Do you know?" "I suppose so, if she had a mind to. She'd been awful sad since the child passed. If you want, I send Henry out to look for her," Mammy answered, taking the infant and looking at Eleanor, smiling. "Now, who be the mama of this child? She sure is pretty." "Her mama is dead. That's why I need Clarissa right away." Eleanor took the baby from Mammy, and Mammy ran into the house, yelling for Henry. "What all the hollering for?" Henry approached almost immediately. "Gone down to the field and fetch Clarissa, quick. Go on now and be quick. We needs her right away." Henry looked at the two women and infant and ran off immediately. Within a few minutes he returned with Clarissa trailing behind. When Eleanor approached Clarissa with the newborn infant and handed her the infant, she shouted with joy. "Oh, Miss Eleanor," she cried, "this is a gift. Yes, it is a gift from God Himself." Eleanor didn't explain details of the birth because she wanted to forget it as quickly as possible. The memory of Sloane's face came to mind, and all the accusing looks of the women, including his wife, spoke volumes of why she hated the man. She instructed Mammy and Clarissa to take the baby into the house and attend to her. Eleanor followed behind and watched as Clarissa sat and nursed Nellie in the kitchen. Eleanor instructed Mammy to have Henry construct a crib for the new arrival and for her to get bedding of sorts to put into it. She then advised Clarissa she would be a maid servant in the main house. Both Nellie and she would stay in the slave quarters attached to the main house. Eleanor watched as Clarissa nursed Nellie in the kitchen every day. As the weeks went by, Eleanor became very fond of Nellie, to the dismay of Clarissa. The nursing session over, Eleanor would hold the baby and stroll up and down the kitchen, sending Clarissa off to perform some trivial household chore. Eleanor mentioned to Charles her fondness for Nellie, and could they possibly think of adopting her? Eleanor, the child is a mulatto. Sure, she had horrible beginnings, but Clarissa has claimed the child, and that's fine with me. We will be having our own children very soon. You wouldn't want to take the child from her. You're right. I suppose we witnessed her sorrowful beginning, and me waiting for our own baby. Must be maternal instinct. I never would want to hurt Clarissa. Charles felt better when he heard his wife coming to her senses. Several weeks after the visit to Sloane Plantation, Eleanor awoke in the middle of the night, her heart pounding terror from a nightmare about Nellie's birth. Clutching at the bedclothes, she cried to her husband, "It was awful, Charles." Sloane was holding the infant up and bellowing for the father to come forward, or he would take the sword he had been holding and cut the baby in two. At this point she was shivering, and although it had been a warm evening, she felt cold. Several other nights scenes like this happened, and Charles insisted she see the doctor. Her doctor examined her thoroughly and told her the nightmares were caused by anxiety. He prescribed a sedative and reassured her that the baby was doing just fine. "Stay off your feet and in bed for a few days," cautioned the doctor. Eleanor did, but it didn't prevent the miscarriage of her baby. Charles felt partly responsible for this because of his strong negative feelings about adopting Nellie. He felt that witnessing Nellie's birth caused all the anxiety, bringing up one nightmare after another for his pregnant wife. Hearing the harsh words of both Sloane and his wife about Nellie caused Eleanor to form a strong attachment. From the moment Eleanor miscarried, Charles made no further comments concerning Nellie. Months led into several years before news of Eleanor having conceived again. End of chapter 1, and if you enjoy this chapter, the book is on Amazon.com. Senator for a Day by Winnie Walsh. Thank you.
Thank you for visiting us and spending a little time with us here at Winnie's lovely home in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. I hope you enjoyed meeting Winnie and hearing a little bit about her brand new book. If you would like to find out what happens next in this story, check out this as well as Winnie's other books at Amazon.com and get your very own copy today. Winnie has been a very dear friend of mine for many, many years. Winnie has resided in Savannah, Georgia for almost 18 years. Prior to moving south, she lived in New York as well as New Jersey, where together with her late husband Donald Sr., they raised 5 wonderful children. She was amongst the first female municipal bond traders in Wall Street in the 1950s, and then later worked in publishing. In the year 2000, she made an unsuccessful run for Georgia seat in the U.S. Senate, supported only by her own finances and the conviction that a woman's voice from Georgia should be heard. Winnie has contributed frequently opt-in pieces to her local and regional newspapers, such as the Newark Star-Ledger, Asbury Park Press, Savannah Morning News, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and others. In fact, writing and editing became her second career. She was a writer and editor for Oil Buyer's Guide, published by McGraw-Hill. And most recently, she edits and writes for something very, very special. It's a magazine for parents raising children with special needs. Most notably, she is the author of 5 published books. Child of the Lots, a fiction. Savannah Joy, a historical fiction. Tim Defines and Defies Down Syndrome, an autobiography. I met Tim. He's amazing. From the South Bronx to Savannah is her memoir. The latest book she has just published is Senator for a Day, which we have found out a little bit about today here. And Winnie has been so gracious to read us the whole first chapter. I found that so exciting when I first heard it. I had to have my own copy right away, as well as Winnie signed it for me. In Winnie Walsh's opinion, an addendum to the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution dealing with election of senators could correct the gender inequity. And though now an octogenarian, she works fervently toward that end, and she continues to write. Winnie, thank you for having me over your home. It was a wonderful time. I wish you the best of luck in your new book. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.